glass moment of the week is actually a kick glass interview of the week. Brittni Donaldson, NBA champion. What's going on?
Hey, Mitch, thanks for having me. Happy to be here. I was so pumped when Jen asked me to come on, so excited to get started.
To me, this is a, females kicking glass, taking names, coaching men, family reunion. And I gotta say, I love just imagining that when people see you coming, they're like, oh no, that's the face of nightmares, because we know Coach Brittni Donaldson has our number. That's right, y'all. If you didn't know, this is the woman who has a fantastic statistical understanding of the game. So not only did she play, but she knows the game within the game and how to put the numbers on it for you. To me, when I first heard that, I was like, yes. I was like, yeah, y'all didn't see her coming, but you should have. And I know that was part of what Mitch was really excited to talk to you about. So now that I've teed it up, Mitch, do you want to follow up with a little bit of that?
Yeah,
I know.
I want to.
So psyched, Coach. Like, I just gotta say,
I want to correlate the numbers to the players and how you coach players based on the analytics or the information. Like at practice, if you're doing something, what are you teaching them and showing them in order to get the best out of their game?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for number one for me, I consider myself to be a basketball coach and a basketball guru, not a numbers analytics guru, right? Like I sometimes get that title of like, well, she's the numbers girl, whatever. And I appreciate that. And I feel honored that people think of me in that light. But honestly, like that's just another tool I have on top of my basketball experience, my basketball knowledge. So I always lead with that first, my basketball experience, my basketball expertise, and relate to the players on that level first. And, like the players are really intuitive. They've been doing this a long time. They know the game really, really well. I feel like my job from an analytics numbers standpoint is just to kind of verify their intuition. So, if they have something they maybe aren't sure about, or maybe they're really sure about, but like, I know I can challenge it a bit, or not challenge it or contradict it, but like, add some color around it a bit with some analytics or some numbers, like an objective point of view to their subjective experience, then I use that as a tool and I use that to help them. And I think when I approach it that way, the players are really, really receptive to it. It's when, people that have analytics backgrounds come with the analytics first and like bombard players with numbers first, that they completely just tune you out. So it's a bit of a balancing act. Like I'd say knowing how to interpret the data and understand the data is only half of the job. The other half of the job is like communicating it and gaining that level of trust in order to communicate it and communicate it properly in a way that players understand.
Coach,
do you have a specific story about using?
I gotta ask her something real quick.
Okay, Jen, that's cool. Go ahead.
Jen's fired up.
I'm fired up on this because I just want one translation point that I think is so powerful. And then I want your question, but I don't want to let it die in my mind with that connection. Coach, I often have people say, we could get you more data if we did X. And my pushback to them is the data is only as good as your ability to use it and to translate it. Because I think you're so spot on that it gets lost a lot of the times. Like there are numbers for days and those numbers would add up to nothing or less than nothing, or -0 or 20,000, depending on how you interpret it. And what I loved so much when I first heard about your story is that you were a baller who first then learned about data, but then found her sweet spot in being able to speak that language to players and really be able to make the data speak. So I just loved how you really encapsulated them, because people get really fascinated by numbers, but if we're not interpreting them the right way, then they just become noise. And so that's all I wanted to clear up
Yeah.
before you got into kind of the numbers, is because I love the synergy of being theory and putting it into practice in a way that, like you said, challenges their intuition or extends on, because that's really what it is. And I love how you said that as a coach, as an athlete. Magic. Go ahead, Mitch. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have the perspective of the player looking at those numbers, because you understand what's doable, what's not doable when you're on the court, right? So my question was, like, have you had a specific example or story of helping a player using analytics to get their game at the next level?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few. I would say one that was most exciting to me, especially early on in my career working with the Raptors, because it was one of my first times. I supported the coaching staff a lot when I was on the analytics team, and didn't have a ton of like direct communication with the players. Like, I was around them and whatnot, but I wasn't on the coaching staff yet. So I actually got a request directly from a player as I was sitting in the analytics office, like in the front office, which was like unheard of for me. And so I was like, and it was Fred VanVleet, and it was early in his career too. And he was injured. I think it was 3 or 4 years ago. He was injured for a span of months, and was sitting out, and was just like itching to get back. And like, he wanted to learn during that time. He wanted to watch his film and analyze his game. And so he messaged me out of the blue and was like, hey, is there anything you can give me as far as like maybe my shot selection or what's working for me, what's not, like anything at all that you can give me from a numbers standpoint that I can look into. And I was so excited. But the first thing I made sure to do was not just send him a spreadsheet of numbers. I sent him a video package and then attached numbers to the video package, because again, I knew when I sent this over, if I just sent this like spreadsheet, or if I just sent a piece of, or an email with a bunch of numbers on it, he's just going to be like, what is this? It's like, it's not interesting. It's not personal. So I made sure to attach that data to actual like tangible video evidence that he could see. And he loved it, man. He had follow-up questions. He applied what I'd said to his workouts when he was working his way back. And it was just little things, right? It wasn't anything like extravagant, but just a little bit of extra information to help him direct his focus. He really appreciated.
That's awesome. Cool story.
Yeah, thank you.
It's so wonderful when the numbers are a part of the story, right?
Yeah.
That's what I always used to say. I'm like, even, like in football, how you start your breakdown determines what information you'll get, right? Like on one team I was on, you could tell that they were they hadn't played the games as much, because they would just look at formations first. And for me, I always watch the game first, right? To see how it develops. And then it's like, okay, when we break it down, you're looking at it. And, certain teams will change their formations that they run things out of each game, so that those season analytics don't seem to tell a story. So if you didn't watch the actual game, what you saw on the numbers would translate to absolutely nothing, right? And so it's got to be this intuitive storytelling mechanism that you're backing up with numbers. And I just think that your ability to do both is where your brilliance is. And speaking of brilliance, I know that you got to be with the G League team. I, having been in developmental leagues, know that there's such an opportunity to build into players at that level, because you really see that they're just an inch from, having been, whether it's the G League team or the big dogs. And I wonder if, I think you're kind of in between doing a little double duty, which means, yep, that's right, she can do it all. Can you tell us a little bit about coaching in the G League, what you thought was different, and kind of how you saw that season?
Yeah, absolutely. It was, so we ended up having a G League bubble for about 50 days was about the span of time. It was 15 regular season games and then a 3-game playoff series. And so it was very short. It wasn't a typical G League season, which is part of the reason I did it, was because it was kind of this thrown together thing in the middle of the NBA season that they're like asking G League teams and franchises like, hey, you guys want to do this? If so, let us know. So it was an opportunity for me to go and coach in a way I hadn't coached yet. And with the Raptors, you know, my first year on the coaching staff, I sat behind the bench and I was pretty involved in like player development and more so things to prepare the players and the coaches for the game. And then, you know, analyze how we did after the game. But during the game, I didn't have many like direct responsibilities, which is what a lot of backbench coaches, that's kind of their experience. They're more hands-on with the players, like one-on-one workouts and putting together development plans and all of that. But and they help out with the game plan, but they're not like creating the game plan, presenting the game plan in the game, like making adjustments, executing on it. And that's what I got to do in the G League, which was really, really fun. So it was a very different coaching experience. You know, in this role, I was putting together scouting reports, full scout plans for games. I was presenting film to the team. I was out in practice, like running the team through drills. I was putting in plays, you know, all these things that I hadn't gotten to do before by myself independently with the Raptors. You know, I was supporting the coaches in those things and I was giving my input, but I wasn't the one out there doing it. So really, really valuable experience for me. And like you said, the players are just so hungry and eager to get better and learn. And they were, you know, the players have always been receptive to me and people like me. I've had issues with players. But these players in particular were just really fun to coach because of how hungry and eager they were. And like you said, they were just there to get better. There was no ulterior motive. There was no like ego attached really. And that was really refreshing for me.
That's awesome. And wait, how was it that you guys finished up in that season?
So, man, we were so close. So we played 15 games in 21 days, which is a lot of games. Like that is an insane amount of games in 3 weeks. And we won 12 of them. And, you know, our roster changed a lot in those, because in the G League, you have players coming up and down and you're trading a lot. And there's just a lot of moving pieces all the time. So you're constantly having to adjust and adapt. And so to win 12 out of the 15 games, we didn't have like a real training camp. We didn't have a real like period where we could build camaraderie and like put in a system and all of that. And so to do that in the regular season, we finished first in the regular season. It's really impressive. Yeah. And I was really, you know, excited to be a part of that. And in the playoffs, like I said, it was just 3 games. So each round, 3 rounds, 1 game each round, which is again, not like it usually is. But we lost in the semifinals to a really good team and one we had beaten in the regular season. But again, it was a really good experience. We had 2 players get called up to 10-day contracts in the NBA during that time. So yeah, it was a success all around for sure.
Well, you know, as you're out there and you're, you know, using your hands to direct them, I've seen the Raptors rings. Like, does it completely make you have to coach one-handed because it's so heavy?
I have it right here if you want me to show it to you.
Oh yeah, we want to see it. Oh yeah, I need the bling thing because I feel like I've seen it on big guy hands. I feel like it may be the size of your hand. Yes. Yes. Look at that bling, y'all. That is Coach Brittni Donaldson, NBA champion. And I can tell that she has to, if she ever wears that coach one-handed, because although it would be a good, you know, workout to just have to move that thing around, but you would have to switch hands because you would completely be like Popeye on one side and olive oil on the other if you rock that constantly. And I love that you have that swag, and obviously like now you're back with the Raptors and you kind of have done double duty, which just speaks to how multifaceted and wonderful you are. But the Raptors actually did a pretty kick-ass thing the other day, you know, and they had an all-female broadcast team. How did that feel for you? You know, being the female of the Raptors and to know that, you know, it's hard sometimes as a coach, you can be a little bit on an island, but certainly in that day, you weren't, and you were surrounded. So can you take me through how that felt to you?
Oh man, I was so excited. I know all 5 of them personally. Kayla, Kate, Amy, Megan, Kia, like they're they're all stars, they're superstars. They've been grinding. Like, I have a story about Megan in particular, Megan McPeak. She did the play-by-play, and she's been doing play-by-play at the professional level for like 11 years now. Like, she's been doing it. And I remember, like, when I first got here, I got introduced to Megan because she was doing play-by-play for the 905, our G League team. And she was the only female in the G League doing it. And I got to know Megan really well. And I just remember her telling me, like, even still, after doing it for 7 years, she was still like grinding it out for herself. She'd record herself over games that she'd tape on TV and then just send that to like anybody and everybody who would take it and try and get a job. She wanted a job in the NBA. And she was doing it all herself without any help. And I was so when she like got to do that game, I was just like, man, like, she's been grinding. Like, I've seen it. She's like so good at her job, and they all are. I mean, Kayla's been in the trenches for a long time, and now she's finally getting the shine she deserves. And it's so crucial, I mean, for people to see that and people to see it done well. And it was done so well. It was like, Kia Nurse has been doing this. She's a WNBA player. She plays for the Phoenix Mercury. She has a whole full-time job on top of this. And she just started doing broadcasting and on air and like a year ago. And she's so good at it. Like, the insight she gives is so deep and thoughtful. And like, really, you can tell she's a genius. She's a basketball genius, and she knows what she's talking about. And it was just like, I was so excited. And for, John Wiggins, who we hired to be our director of equity, inclusion, diversity about a year ago, he's just done a fantastic job. Like, he had the vision for this. He was the one that had the idea to do this. And it takes somebody like him to have that sort of vision for something like that to be done. And so I applaud him. I applaud all those girls. It was the highlight of my year for sure. I was like so excited to watch. And it's a rare opportunity that I get to watch our games on TV. Like, and I'm just in a situation now where I was able to watch it on TV and experience that like I wanted to. So I felt really grateful and proud of all of them.
It's so amazing. And you touched on something that I know I personally speak to a lot, and that's the importance of having allies, right? Who are in that position that can use their position to be instigators for change. And obviously you've had quite a few. Is there anybody that you would really shout out who kind of was that for you?
Oh yeah, I have. I mean, I wouldn't be here today if I didn't have my allies along the way. And that's even from the very beginning, before I even knew working in the NBA was possible. And I'd read your book. I'd like skimmed through your book after you gave it to me about a year ago or however long that was. But I'd like the last 3 days, I read the whole thing in like 2.5 days. I was just like, and reading it, I was like, yes, because you hit on it too. Like, if the coach with the Texas Revolution hadn't like forced you to take the job, if BA hadn't like forced you to take the job, and it wasn't that like we didn't think we could do it. It's just, it didn't seem real or tangible. And so for me, like, before I started working in the NBA, I was working at a sports data provider called Stats in Chicago. And I was crunching numbers and building reports for NBA teams. But actually working for an NBA team, I had never thought of. It just wasn't a visual like possibility for me. And it was my boss at that company that approached me and was like, hey, have you ever considered this? And I was like, well, no, he's like, well, why not? Like, and he pushed me in that direction because I think he saw something in me that I didn't quite see in myself yet. And so I needed that. I needed that encouragement, that push. And, there were several others along the way. But even when I got to the Raptors, Masai Ujiri giving me the opportunity, continuing to put me in places that I never intended to be a coach. It wasn't until he and Bobby Webster in management put that idea in my head that I really started to consider it. And that's what it takes. I mean, some people know exactly what they want to do their whole life. And I've never been that person. I've been this, like, I have all these things I want to do, like I don't have like a one-track mind. I have like a bunch of different interests and passions. And so sometimes I need a little bit of, no, try this. You can do this, and a little push in that direction. And that's what I got. And I feel really grateful.
Well, I remember hearing that from you and from your lips and seeing the passion, at at that panel in Ryerson, and I was like, oh yeah, this is my kind of people right here. And I think one of the things that we've connected on is also, maybe we didn't see it, but because of that, we've really taken steps to be people that others can see it in, and they could maybe see themselves in. And that's one of the things I've always loved about you is your willingness to, go with your own style and be relatable and be something, someone and something that other girls would aspire to be. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think being authentic is just really, really important. I think in our line of work, it can be easy to fall victim to assimilation, or like feeling like you have to fit in or have to coach like the guys do, or talk and dress and whatever like the guys do. And I think having the boldness and the self-assurance and the confidence to just be authentic and be yourself is really valuable, because especially in coaching, like players see right through the BS. If you're not being yourself, like, or if you're trying to be something you're not, they tune you out in a second. So being authentic, I think, is number one thing. And, colleagues appreciate that too. It takes pressure off of them to, and they're able to be themselves if you're being yourself. So yeah. And you touch on that in your book too. And like, as I was reading it, I'm like, yes. Cause I feel the exact same way, and I've lived it and I know it to be true. So I think just being authentic and doing a lot of work to get to know who you are and what you stand for, and then displaying that on a daily basis is something, I try to do.
I know.
Was there a moment of confidence for you in that stretch of time when you were coming up the ranks where you're like, yeah, you know what? I've made it. Like, I'm here. I can do this.
Yeah, it was a little bit of both. It was confidence, but it was also like, oh, am I ready for this? Like, I don't, so I needed, like I said, I needed the support and I needed the allyship. At the same time though, like I knew I'd put the work in. I knew I was ready, prepared. But it was, that assurance from my allies was like really, really helpful, and really, really, I think brought my confidence to fruition. Gave me the motivation I needed to take that step, to push forward and to do it confidently. And it doesn't go to say that like I need somebody to hold my hand or anything like that. I would have done it, but it helped me do it in an authentic way. And I think that's really important.
I know when we first talked and I heard you speaking, and authenticity rings so true. What was so cool to me is I was like, oh my gosh, this is like my sister from another mister in another sport, right? Mm-hmm. Because when you're first, that also implies that you're only. And I know that's something that I've struggled with along the way, is not necessarily always feeling like people get you or get it. And I felt that when we were talking, and I think that's why, we kind of instantly became friends. I was like, I want to come to a game. Here's a number. And, basketball is not my number one sport, obviously. But I tell people all the time, I'm like, if you want to change the dynamics of the sports, then allow them to fall in love with the people in the sport, right? Beyond the helmet, beyond, that old shut up and dribble mentality. And what I want to think about is, like, I see that in you, and I know others do too. Is there a particular instance that you could give, kind of that being a female coaching guys, which a lot of people still really have problems seeing, right? Like they don't get it. Like the number one narrative with me would guys in the NFL take coaching from a woman? And I was like, hashtag newsflash. Most of them have been being coached by women their whole lives, maybe just not in football. And yet I think when we tell those stories, it really gives people an opportunity to understand and fall in love with some of these guys on a human level beyond just a performance level. Do you have maybe an instance like that that you could share?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of just mentioned it. A lot of our players were coached by their moms, like actually coached in basketball by their moms growing up. And that became evident to me because they shared that with me. They're like, this brings me back. Like, I used to be coached by my mom, and like they loved being coached by their mom. And it was funny. It was actually one of my assistant coaches brought it up to me one time. We had one player who was a little defiant to most coaches and a little bit tough to direct at times. But to me, he was always very receptive. And one of our coaches came up to me. He's like, "Do you know why that is?" And I was like, "No, I'm just trying to be the most authentic like coach I can be and get to know him." And he brought to my attention that, well, he never really had a father figure in his life, and his mom raised him and coached him until he was in high school. And I think like this, it's comforting for him, like he's receptive to it in that way. And so it just kind of opened my eyes to this whole other, idea that like, and I knew I never had a problem interacting with the guys or gaining their respect, but I didn't like understand why all the time. Because I knew there was probably some presumption that there would be a little pushback, but there never was. So that's part of it. I think, like you mentioned, a lot of these guys, whether it was coaching sports or whether it was teachers they had, or they've had like female leaders in their lives, and it's not this new phenomena that they just don't know how to act. It's like, it's not like that at all. And like we mentioned before, if we lead with authenticity, they know why we're there. We're there to make them better. We're there because we love the sport. We've been in their shoes to some capacity. We can empathize with them. We care about them as people. And that's something I'm really intentional about, is for every basketball, pointer I give somebody, like I ask 3 questions about their life, like who they are, what they're interested in, who's important to them. I try to get to know them. I try to take deliberate time outside of practice to get to know them. And I even like interweave it, if we're on the court, we're just like shooting hoops, I'm rebounding, I'm passing, like casual conversation, like, "Hey, how's your sister? Like, how's your daughter doing?" Just little questions like that. And it goes a really long ways. And it's not anything revolutionary, right? It's just being a human being and having empathy and caring about people outside of what their stats say. But it really does. It goes a long ways.
And yet it's interesting because within the world of men's professional sports, it is revolutionary in a way,
It is.
right? To put the people first. I remember hearing so often that the game doesn't love you. And I would always say, but that doesn't mean that the people in it can't. And when I would tell my players like, "Hey man, I love you." And like, I've had guys be like, "I've never felt that from a coach before." And they're like, "I know it even if you don't say it." Or other players' wives being like, "Coach Jen, he loves you, right? Like that is deep." And I say, when somebody will bring you into their life and trust you enough to like understand who they are, then to tell them something about what they do is really pretty easy, because we already have a foundation of love and trust, and I have your best interest in mind. So if I tell you something regarding a technique, like where it's coming from, and it's like, "Oh yeah, okay, gotcha, coach, thanks," right? But that came from, I think, love and trust, and I love having it reinforced across sports. I remember Nancy Lieberman reaching out to me when the story got out that I, wrote my players' notes, and that was like revolutionary in the National Football League, right? And everybody's like freaking out. And she goes, "Hey, coach, just so you know, I do that for my guys too." And I was like, "You do?" And she was like, "Absolutely. And they love it every time." She's like, "Great stuff. I'm so proud of you." And I was just like, yes, I'm not the only one. And I was the only one at that time in football, but knowing, her and knowing you, I think it fortifies everybody. And I think it also speaks to how we need to look at leadership and make sure that we're telling the stories of human first, because it used to be that coaches were autocratic, right? And it was very top down. And I think we're seeing a revolution in one where we lead with empathy, and we're coaching both players and people to be their best on and off the field or court.
Yeah, I agree. And I still think there's a long ways to go in that department. But but I do think we're making strides in putting an emphasis on not just how a player produces in games, but their actual overall development, both on the field, on the court, and off. We're putting investments and resources into other things like mental wellness and nutrition and sleep. And we're ensuring that, these players feel supported and safe, and in all regards, not just when they're in uniform on the court. But yeah, I would say we're starting to have the right conversations, and we have progress to make, but it's going in the right direction.
I couldn't agree more.
Maybe speak a little bit to like the perspective, because I actually heard Bruce Arians talk about this with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where it was like, I try to have as many different types of people on my coaching staff to relate to the players, but also, to help me as well. So maybe talk about that within basketball and how that helps a team win and become a better team. Yeah.
Different perspectives is so crucial. I mean, no matter where you are, sports or not, coaching or not, it's so crucial. I mean, in order to make an informed decision about anything, like having as much information as possible from as many different places as possible. And this is my data brain talking, but that's what you want, right? That's how you make an optimal decision. And having leaders in place that value that sort of diversity, or that sort of differences in perspectives and backgrounds and experiences is crucial. Having leaders that just want everybody like them, that think the same, that are yes men, yes women, that's not going to get you very far in the long run. Maybe in the short run it works, but in the long run it won't, because our landscape is constantly changing and progressing and shifting, and you never know what's going to happen, like global pandemic. Okay. So we need people that have different perspectives and can adapt, that have a range of experiences, so that you can pull from those experiences and not just the one thing you know how to do. It's crucial, especially in an ever-changing, ever-evolving environment.
Having been a basketball player and being a woman who has both played in the women's realm and seen it, and then seen the resources and access that the guys get, and knowing that you've lived those differences. With what just happened with Sedona Prince and her shedding a light on the inequity between the women's game and the men's game in March Madness, how did that impact you?
I was outraged. I was upset, but I was not surprised in the slightest. Like you mentioned, I lived that. That's just one drop in the bucket of all the inequalities that we experience as women playing sports. So it was important. Like I'm really proud of those players and the coaches that spoke up for speaking up, because I think for so long we were just conditioned to be satisfied with just being there in the first place. So now that we're taking steps towards speaking out on, no, we're not just happy to be here. We're not just happy to have the crumbs. Like, we want the whole thing and more, and we deserve it. That's so important. And yeah, it really hit a chord with me because of everything I experienced playing in the NCAA. And to see that it's still happening to the same degree with Title IX in place, like in the middle of Women's Month, it's like in the middle of this year that we're really trying to progress and make change, like it's still happening to that degree. It's incredibly disappointing, but at the same time, it's good to shed light on it because it's time to change it and make it better. And in order to do that, we need to continue to talk about it and like make it truth. I think to a lot of people, it's not quite truth yet. And it's not personal enough to them. And I think talking about it will make it more personal and hopefully progress towards change.
If you could wave a magic wand to that change, right? This is Coach Brittni with her big ring. I'm actually going to use that. It's better than a magic wand because you earned that. Her diamonds are earned, by the way. Her rings are earned, not given. If you could wave that, or actually, I'm sorry, wave that magic ring and change things, what would that look like to you?
Oh, I mean, I could write a book on this, and I probably will at some point.
We talked about this. There are many books we could write.
Hey, I just wanted to stop being a conversation. I just want it to be normalized, and there doesn't need to be a distinction between the two. There doesn't need to be compartmentalized, like anything about it. We're all athletes, we're all coaches, we're all whatever it is. I guess in short, that's what I would want. Just, we don't need to have these conversations anymore. We can just appreciate greatness and appreciate passion and hard work and dedication and all those things that go into being athletes and coaches and being people who work in sport. And we can just leave it there.
Yeah, I found, it was so interesting with the March Madness situation. I found even the explanation disconcerting, right? Like, oh, we didn't talk about it. I'm like, really? Because here's the thing. You had 2 bubbles with needs. Why were you having separate conversations about getting those needs fulfilled, right? Like, hey, guess what? This is what we need for a weight room for this many people for this much time. This is the equipment that we need. Now, where are we going to source it from? And isn't it more efficient even to, have those sourcing conversations that already start from a place of, we need this twice, but you did twice the work to treat them differently, right? Yeah. And even if you would have taken that one weight room that the guys had and split it in 2, it would have been pretty doable, right? But yet we started from a place that they're not the same and we're not going to treat them the same. And then we get surprised when the outcome is different. That to me was like, we're so flawed in our logic from the jump. It's no wonder that these things continue.
Yeah, we're being very proactive about, or reactive. We're being reactive about these issues, and we're not being proactive. And that narrative needs to flip. And you kind of just hit on it, but everything that stems from patriarchy and misogyny, it's not only harmful to women, it's really harmful to men too. It's harmful for everybody. And so we need to shed light on that. And it's not just women fighting for equality. It's better for the whole of the human race if we are just, more intentional about treating everybody equally.
Absolutely. Mitch, do you have anything else?
I want to get into Mitch's Minute. That's what I want to do.
Yes.
Ooh, Mitch's Minute?
Yes, Brittni, you will love Mitch's Minute. I had a feeling, that's why I wanted to make sure.
So what Mitch's Minute is I give you 5 questions. It never lasts a minute, but the name is just the name, okay? 5 questions, rapid fire style, and you have to give me your quick reaction.
Oh boy. Okay, well, I'm a thinker and I think slowly, but I'll do my best.
Question number 1. Now, we are an NFL podcast, so I thought I would ask you, do you have a favorite NFL team or maybe a player that you admire?
I grew up watching Dan Marino, which is funny because you have the jersey. I'm not lying. That was my guy and that was my team. So I'm going to say the Dolphins.
Awesome. I picked the right jersey then.
Yeah.
Number 2. What was your reaction to Kyle Lowry staying with the Raptors?
Heck yeah. I'll keep him as long as I want. Yeah. Keep him as long as we can.
Number 3. The biggest difference between the men's basketball game and the women's basketball game?
Can I be honest?
Yeah, totally.
Preparation and execution.
Okay. Can you expand on that if you mind?
To me, I think the women's game spends more time in prepping and executing on that preparation. The men's game sometimes it seems can get a little bit enamored by raw talent and athleticism and highlight reels. So I'm speaking in generalities. Obviously, there's exceptions to this, but overall, that's something I observe.
From the outside perspective, I would say that the men's game is kind of more individual driven and the women's game is more team driven, but that's just my opinion. Number 4, favorite stat that you ever came across with a player or a team? Like you were just looking at it like, what is this?
Oh man, favorite stat? Oh man.
Or just a crazy stat that you couldn't believe.
Are we talking about basketball stats?
Any stat.
Oh, I read this one the other day. I think 96% of C-suite level females played sports growing up. So 96% of women who hold CEO, COO, CFO positions played sports growing up. I thought that was a staggering stat.
Final question. One-on-one ISO, okay? What is the move? What are you doing? You have to have it. Last play of the game.
Yeah. I'm a step back between the legs person. I like to play the mental game. I like to have counter moves, and I like to think that I can make the defense do what I want and then counter that with another move.
I like that.
I'm not like short bursts of speed get by somebody, but I can play the mind game and get you to do what I want.
Awesome. All right, that is Mitch's minute, and that is Brittni, Donaldson. Jen, wrap it up.
I will, because I have one question that usually is my football question. So Brittni, I talk about FBI, which is football IQ. Mm-hmm. And one of my favorite questions to ask coaches and players is, and I know it's going to be the same in basketball, is there a favorite key you ever picked up on reading another player or another team? You were like, oh yeah, I got your number and this is what it is.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah. So I was on the red carpet and Brett Favre was right before me. And our reporter said, if you could ask him one question, what would it be? And I said, well, I would ask him his favorite key. He comes back and I got to ask him. And he starts laughing. And he's like, oh, the longer I played, the more important that got, right? At first, I would just athletic it out. But when I got later in my game, I started to pay a whole lot more attention. And he's like, we finally picked up when Brian Urlacher raised his hand, it meant he was blitzing opposite. Didn't mean we could stop him, but at least I knew where he was coming from. So something that somebody does predictably that you could pick up on that you were like, ooh, I've got your number.
Oh yeah. I mean, when I played, it was everything from, oh, this person, they just wanted block shots. They just want to block shots. Like every time you shot fake, they're going to jump, fouling them out of the game by like the third quarter because I knew that, or, like offensively, there was always something like if somebody looked at the line, they were going to pull up and shoot it. Like they could be dancing with it, but if they looked at the line, they were going to stop and shoot it. So little stuff like that, you definitely pick up on, like, as you're watching film, as you're playing, like I said, we're intuitive, like we know. And a lot of that stuff doesn't show up in data or in stats. Like you can't be given that information with numbers. It's something you have to observe and analyze yourself. So yeah, I love that stuff.
I agree. Me too. That's the fun stuff to me. I'm like, oh, I've got the cheat codes.
Yep.
And then they'd wonder why you were so fast or so effective. It'd be, well, you couldn't quantify it. You kind of could, sort of, if you really tried, but it's not something somebody's, necessarily grabbing, right? To be able to quantify it. But once you got it, I always say my favorite players get better throughout the game because once they get your number, ooh, it's trouble.
Yep, exactly right.
Well, I must say, this is quite possibly one of my favorite conversations, and certainly my favorite kick glass conversation, because though we might be in different sports, I think we have very similar spirits. And everything you do, I want you to know that you You have a sister on a, I can't say parallel path because we all kind of do like this, but at least somebody that you can call every time. And I just want to thank you for opening up and sharing just the wonderful person that you are with everybody listening and giving those insights, because I know I could sit and listen to them all day.
Oh man, I want to echo all those sentiments and just say having somebody like you to follow in your footsteps and see what you've done and be able to literally just pick up the phone and call you at any moment, like you don't know how much that means and how grateful and special that is to me. So thank you. I'm so happy we've crossed paths and it was a pleasure being on the podcast.
Anytime. You got me. I'll let you go.
Yes, sir.